A bird in hand is worth two in the bush. A fairy tale. Kazza should have been more careful, but he was hungry. More importantly, his wife and child were hungry. Fatigue and hunger had caused the slip and fall down the bluff. But it was the branch that broke his fall and buried itself in his shin that caused the cut. When he removed it, his shin bone was showing. The wound was born of carelessness. Kazza pushed his palms against his closed eyes, pushing away the pain. His hands then went down his face. His cheeks were sunken, and their bones were angular. He opened his eyes, then plucked a leaf from a bush. With his other hand, he reached in his pouch. The combination of ground roots and herbs mixed in the leaf. Then he licked the leaf and chewed together with the herbs into a paste. He pressed them against the gash in his shin. That would hold the wound and prevent infection until he got home. His wife could then give it a proper cleaning. Not that it would do much good if he couldn't find something to eat. Still sitting, Kazza strung his bow, then pulled the string a couple of times, always careful not to release the string at tension. The bow seemed to be in decent enough shape, but dry firing could ruin that, along with his wrist. He could probably stand. Between the wound and his fatigue, he decided to remain sitting. He checked the arrows in his quiver. Broken. Broken, 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 broken. The final arrow had no obvious breaks. His fingers ran along its pine grain. Pristine. Undamaged. A rustle came from the bushes. Kazza held his breath and watched. His eyes were wide in wonder and anticipation. The bush rustled again. A gray-legged goose strolled into the open. It pecked at the ground with its beak, eating roots, shoots, stems, and seeds. It lifted its head and swallowed. While digesting, it stared out into the open, standing still with its back to Kazza. Kazza's luck could not have been better. He knocked his arrow and drew. He was in a prone and awkward position, but he didn't dare move for fear of alerting the goose to his presence. From mere paces away, he couldn't miss. He loosed the arrow. And did not miss. The arrow struck the goose in the leg, felling it. The goose squawked in pain. With great effort, Kazza stood. He winced in pain, but his leg would heal, and his family would eat. He drew his knife and approached the goose. There was no need to make it suffer. The goose flapped and squawked as Kazza knelt over it, his knife ready.
Wait,
Squawked the goose. Kazza jumped back in fear.
please don't kill me.
The goose pleaded. Kazza inspected his hands. One covered in goose blood, the other his carving knife. Perhaps his hunger or his wound were making him hallucinate. Geese can't talk. The fact that he had to remind himself of that was disturbing enough. He focused on the goose.
Spare me. I will pay you back double.
Kazza knew better, for a bird in hand is worth two in the bush. He drew his knife over the goose's throat, the terror in its eyes all too familiar, all too human.
Please, I have a wife and daughter. They're expecting me home for dinner.
Kazza sheathed his knife. He pulled the arrow from the goose's leg. The goose was too afraid to scream from pain. Kazza's hand reached for a leaf from the bush. He sprinkled the combination of ground roots and herbs mixed in the leaf. Then he licked the leaf and chewed together with the herbs into a paste. He pressed them against the wound in the goose's leg. Then he massaged the wound. All the while, the goose stared at him in wonder. After a couple minutes, the goose stood on its own volition. It limped around in a circle, but the wound would heal. Within a week, its walk would be fine. Kazza and the goose studied each other for a moment. Then the goose flew away. Tired, wounded, and hungry, Kazza had had enough of the morning. Perhaps he could try hunting again later that day. For now, his wound needed healing. He limped all the way to his cabin. On one hand, he was excited to see his wife and daughter. On the other hand, disappointment filled him, for he had nothing to feed their hungry bodies. The odor struck him first when he opened his door. Roast turkey. The kind his family had had on Brevis back when time was kinder. Underneath, subtler notes of carrots and potatoes and celery caught his attention. Over the stove, his daughter helped his wife with the final meal preparations. Gone were their gaunt cheeks and eyes sunken with despair. Round cheeks and glowing, healthy flesh replaced them. Even the house looked different. Where holes had been in his roof that let rain drip it all night, they were patched now. The pile of firewood that had been near empty when he had left that morning was now stacked to the ceiling. Kazza rushed to the pantry. It had been down to a few rotten vegetables that morning. Now it brimmed with everything you could grow in a garden. Potatoes, turnips, carrots, beets. Kazza could hardly believe his eyes. His family noticed his presence. His daughter hugged him. Then his wife marveled at the wound and how skinny he looked. She cleaned the wound with soap and water, then served him the most wonderful turkey dinner he had ever eaten. As he stuffed his face, he wondered if the goose was enjoying a meal with his family and was as happy as he was.